And just for those of you who may or may not have joined us before, we do record these events and we often post them to our website, or sometimes we don't post them. And if you're looking for that content, depending on the speaker, we can share those with you as well. So if you're ever looking for past experiences, or excited about a future event but can't make it in person, feel free to reach out, and I would be happy to share those recordings. But we'll go ahead and get started. It is noon. So hi and welcome to all of those who've joined us before, or if this is your first time, welcome. My name is Megan Teresi, and I'm the director of our Professional Development Center here at St. Ambrose University. One of the things we strive to do at the Professional Development Center is provide you educational content like today's Lunch and Learn that's timely and suited to your needs. So Heather, if you don't mind advancing the slide, I did want to share one other upcoming opportunity that we have. Specifically for those who might be in the HR profession or in any retention and recruitment role, we will be hosting an in-person half-day event on October 13th. It will actually be on main campus due to increased interest. So we'll be in the Rogalski Center, if you're familiar with St. Ambrose campus, and we'll be really diving into, what's really driving this next generation as far as their interests and needs on the recruitment spectrum. And we'll be talking about some best practices. You'll hear from panelists who are recent SAU alum who've been going through this process during COVID, with all these workforce changes, and answering your questions. And we'll wrap up with some roundtable discussions with your peers in the industry. So really a half day to get some best practices and things like that. If you're interested, if this is for you, whip out your phone camera, point it at the little scan bar there to register, and get yourself set up for that day. I will also share that link in the chat once I'm done talking here at the beginning. We can go to the next slide. And with that, we also are fortunate to have the JCs of the Quad Cities, our young professional organization, as a sponsor for this event series. So I'm going to give it over to Nikki to just tell us a little bit about the JCs and one of their upcoming events.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for attending the call today. As Megan has said before, we really appreciate everyone's time. I just wanted to let you know about the JCs of the Quad Cities' newest fundraiser, BBQC, which is presented by Midwest Grilling Supplies. It will be happening here in just about 10 days, so October 1st and 2nd in LeClaire Park in Davenport, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. We would love to have you, but then also we are looking for volunteers. So if anyone would like to help out and volunteer at the event, I can get you that information. Do not hesitate to reach out to Megan or myself. We would love to have you. We will also on October 2nd in the afternoon have our craft beer tasting, which is previously known as Brouhaha. So we will be honoring those roots and having that event as well.
Thanks, Nikki. And one of the things I love about the JCs is they really are a philanthropic organization. They're young professionals, but the reason they have events like this is all the money that they raise. Really, these are unpaid volunteers, right? So all the money they raise goes back to funding great programs like the one you're on today, but also some of our nonprofits and really supporting the great work that they do in the community. So these are great fundraising events to really give right back to the community and development. So thanks, Nikki. Heather, if you can advance one more time. So one thing we love to do during these, even though we are virtual, is just take a couple of minutes to get to know other folks on the call. So again, if this is not for you, if you are eating lunch or otherwise distracted, just hang out with us for a couple of minutes and we'll get started with our keynote right around 12:10. But if you are interested in this, I am going to go ahead and split us up into some breakout rooms. And we'd love for you just to take a minute to get to know each other. So you should see a link to join the room. And have a couple of minutes to just talk about who you are, where you're coming to us from, and what you're hoping to learn today. So go ahead and join those rooms when you're ready, and I'll bring you back in just a couple of minutes and we'll get started. Sorry, y'all. There they are. They're open now. you should see a link to join. And like I said, if you are not up for that today, just hang out. And Heather, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide too for when we welcome everyone back.
All right.
And that'll be my last slide, and then I'll have you take it over from there.
All right, sounds good. About how many do we have on? I didn't want to mess too much with my view of participants because I didn't want to mess up my ability to get back to where I wanted to be. About how many do we have?
We have about 35, I think.
Excellent. That's great. Do you keep a list of who joins or do you get a list?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Good.
And if you are just joining us, we are just in breakout rooms, getting to know each other a little bit. We'll be coming back together in about a minute and a half, and then we'll get started on today's content. So just hang out with us for another minute and a half, and then we'll get started. All righty, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you got to know a new face or somebody from a new organization today. We love creating those connections here. And just another quick shout out to the JCs of the Quad Cities. They are the reason for the gift cards that we're also able to give you after these events. So expect those in your email inboxes sometime later this afternoon. And it's just another way where we are really excited to give back to the community. We try to pick local restaurants to support with those gift cards. We're always open to new suggestions of places. If you have some place in mind that you haven't gotten from before, but again, our intent is really to give back to the community through these events. So without further ado, thanks to the JCs, without further ado, I have the honor to introduce Dr. Heather Honig-Schwinnaker today, who's our event speaker, and she'll be speaking on employee coaching. And Heather comes to us from, she's an industrial and organizational psychologist with over 20 years of experience in leadership and employee development, including workplace coaching. So she comes to us with some great experience and look forward to hearing from her. Thanks so much for being here, Heather.
Thanks, Megan. I'm so glad to see everyone who's joined. A lot of familiar names and faces, but also some new names and faces. So I'm really glad that everyone has taken the time today. All right. So yes, as Megan mentioned, I'm Heather Honig-Schwinnaker, 20 years experience with employee development and coaching, including leadership development. I have coached individual contributors, managers, and directors who are working toward achieving goals. I have provided skill building to other coaches. And I've also developed coaching skills among managers. As a result of today's Lunch and Learn, you'll be able to interact with employees and peers in a way that conveys confidence in them and supports their ability to solve problems. Identify situations where coaching is appropriate, and choose an environment that supports coaching. I've got a couple of questions to get you thinking. Please use the chat feature. If you want to come off mute, you can participate that way too. So this is our first question. Is this true or false? It's the manager's job to tell employees what to do and how to do it. Yeah, I'm watching the chat, seeing quite a bit of false here. So glad y'all are participating. Here's our second question, also true or false. A manager must have all the answers. What do you think? I love that. No way. Yeah. Again, thanks for participating. Yeah, I agree. Both of those are false. And I think that this quote from Simon Sinek captures it nicely. A leader's job is not to do the work for others. It's to help others figure out how to do it themselves, to get things done and to succeed beyond what they thought possible. If you see that quote and you think, yeah, that's the leader that I want to be, then developing the coaching habit, that coaching leadership style can really help you to be successful. Coaching employees is about asking them thought-provoking questions that help them solve their own problems, think strategically, innovate, and prepare to respond to future situations that neither of you have ever experienced. Today, I'm focused on coaching your employees, which is a little different from being in a long-term coaching engagement designed to develop an individual. And so we're really talking about the leadership style of coaching, the coaching leadership style, when is that appropriate? And in contrast, professional coaches are always using coaching techniques with their clients. Coaching is not telling employees what to do. It's not telling them how to do their work. It's not giving advice, and it's not critiquing or giving feedback. Coaching is not making your employees guess at your thought-provoking question until they come to the answer that you think is correct. So giving direction, advice, and feedback are all valuable. They all have times when they are appropriate and when employees need that information. They just aren't a part of coaching. Here are some reasons to use coaching skills: to foster employee development, build autonomy and engagement, enable employees to be more independent so you can focus on matters that you are uniquely positioned to address. And your employees may come up with better answers, better ideas than you would. I understand that not everyone on today's webinar has direct reports, and that is fine because everyone can find value in today's content. You can use coaching skills to help a peer think through a dilemma. You could develop coaching skills now so that you're better prepared for a future leadership role. And you can use the approach with people outside of work. For example, with colleagues on a community committee or with family members. My teenage daughter does not want to hear my advice. However, she will listen to a thought-provoking question or two from me and give that some consideration as she decides how she wants to move forward. I've got a simple approach to coaching to offer you. Start by checking for an opening. People need to be in the right headspace. If there's a good chance that the timing is right, you could say, I see you're working through something. Would it help you organize your thoughts if I asked you a few questions? You could ask something like, what would be useful to you? Are you looking for an opinion, or are you looking for some help to think through the issue? Another way to check for an opening would be, I noticed you missed a deadline. Is now a good time for us to discuss so that you can get back on track? Once that you're sure that the individual is open to your coaching, ask open-ended questions. If you rely on yes/no questions, it's just not going to get you there. Give the other person time to think. So they may need more time than what you've allotted in a meeting that you've scheduled. If it's a complex matter, they might need overnight, for example, to think about how they want to respond in the situation and how they want to further the conversation with you. Avoid telling the employee, avoid guiding them to a particular answer. If you've got to believe that the person is capable of finding a great answer, even if it's not the one that you would have come up with. Let's consider some questions that you could ask to encourage someone's thinking so that they can resolve an issue. I'm going to read what's in the Say This column on the right, and I'll give you a moment to read and consider what is on the Instead of This column on the left. I'm sorry, I swapped that. I'm going to say what's on the Say This column on the left while you read and consider what's on the Instead of This column on the right. What ideas are you having for an effective response to the vice president? What ideas have you generated for solving this problem? You seem frustrated. How can I help? Where are you stuck? What's preventing you from achieving your goal? Got a few more. Who could help you? If you resolve this promptly, what does that make possible? You have good ideas. What recommendations do you have for moving the team forward? What are you willing to commit to so this works out well? Imagine you've taken that approach. To what extent do you think it will have permanently solved the problem? All right, so I've got all of those statements here on this slide. This is a great time to get some more participation going. You can use the chat feature. You can also come off of mute. If you have heard statements in that left column from your manager, the Say This column, I'd like to know, how did those statements make you feel? So we're starting with the left column, Say This. If you've heard that from a manager, how did that make you feel? All right, so feeling supported, empowered. Useful. Validated. Yeah, like people have great ideas. Sometimes you just need to work with them to surface them. Yeah, that people have control over their situation. Yeah, trust. You got it. Yeah, you know, sometimes you can get those questions on the left and it's not the right time. You may not be in the position, you may not feel the freedom to use it. So there is some context dependency here. I will admit that. I'm not saying that all of those questions are always right. So yeah, let's flip it now. Let's take a look at that column on the right instead of this. When you have heard those, so I think I've seen already that it can be really frustrating when your manager's response is like that column on the right. Any other reactions that you've had? How would you describe that feeling when you hear those statements on the right? Yeah. Those statements and then instead of this column can feel like you're being micromanaged, you've been shut down, frustrated. Yeah, it may feel like your manager is really not behind you. It's not motivating. Yeah, nobody likes to guess 20 plus times to eventually come up with the answer that their manager had in mind. That's not helpful. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's just remembering, hey, these smart people that are working for you, with you, and sometimes they need your help, but they probably need you to help them think and not really just tell them what to do all of the time. Good. I'm so glad everybody's participating. That makes it so much more interesting. All right, I'm going to take us to our next slide here. So some good opportunities for coaching include when an employee comes to you with a dilemma, or a peer, they've got a dilemma. Maybe they're lacking confidence for solving a problem. Sometimes an individual has a basket full of clues about how to deal with a situation, and they just need someone's help to sort through and figure out which clues are actually helpful and which are red herrings. When the individual is experiencing a conflict with another person, that can be a great time for coaching. If they're having difficulty making progress, or if they've shared some additional initial ideas for an innovative solution and they need help to develop those ideas so that they can be put into action. Coaching is not always appropriate. There are some times when you would need to be more directive. For example, if there's an emergency, if the building is on fire, that is not the time to have thought-provoking questions with employees. That is the time to just make sure everyone gets out safely. When there's an urgent matter, for example, let's think back to the VP I mentioned earlier. If that VP is expecting an immediate response, go ahead and give it. And then you can work with the employee afterward when you have more time and things are calmer to think through the situation, help them think about how they would navigate it so that they're better prepared to respond in the future. If the answer is a matter of policy or standard operating procedure, then pointing the individual to that answer, either just giving it to them or letting them know where they can find the answer is the best approach. When the employee is a novice, very new at a task at hand, he or she may not have the experience that's needed to really meaningfully think through a situation. And so in those cases, more direction may be useful until the individual has more experience. So attempts to coach your employees may frustrate them when you have not yet provided a vision or the context that they need to meaningfully think through the situation. It's also frustrating if you're going to override their decisions anyway. Please don't embark on a coaching conversation, ask thought-provoking questions, and then tell the employee to do something other than what he or she came up with. Okay, let's use that chat feature again. You're also welcome to come off of mute. Sometimes it's fun to hear voices. It's fun to have the variety. Imagine that you are having a coaching conversation with an employee or a colleague. What elements to the environment do you think are important?
Hey, Heather, one thing that jumps to mind for me is just having a context where people, whether it's a private room or a private phone call, so that people can just be speaking very freely and not having to edit like sometimes we have to do when there's a broader audience.
Thanks, Michelle. I agree. Privacy. You need an environment where people can really think and not have to edit themselves. You need time, listening skills. Yeah. These are all good answers.
Yeah, that was a question I had, Heather. Like, as far as obviously you need privacy, maybe you're getting to this. How do you plan for that privacy without it being like an event?
That's such a good question. So maybe you've already got a meeting set up, maybe there's something, a regular meeting. Maybe you can go to lunch and find a place that's private. And I think it's okay. Sometimes you might check for that opening. And then if the person says, yeah, I'd like to work with you, maybe you realize the timing is not great. But if you'd set aside time and a private place to have that conversation, then both of you would be comfortable and it would be successful. Good question. Yeah, I'm seeing some fun comments there. People have got it, a lot of good ideas. Yeah, people like having adequate notice. You definitely don't want someone to feel pounced upon. And again, that's checking for the opening. Particularly people who are introverts might need that heads up. Hey, let's have this conversation so that they can come as prepared as possible. All right, I love to see the participation. So thanks for coming off mute and for keeping the chats coming. So the things that I had thought about specifically as I prepared this conversation was you need undistracted time together and you need an environment that fosters deep thinking. So you got to close that laptop, put the phone aside. You may have had that situation where you're looking to speak with someone and you finally see them in the hall and each of you is starting off in another direction to go to some kind of a meeting. That's not a great time for a coaching conversation. That's probably just enough time for a manager to be directive. So perhaps that's the time to say, hey, I've been thinking about you. I'd like to talk with you. I'm going to send you an appointment so that we can have a conversation, but don't try to have the coaching while each of you are running off to other meetings. Okay, so some of you have tapped into this. I've seen it in the chat and I'm so glad that you're on it. You got it. So to successfully coach employees, you need a trusting relationship. You got to have that mutual trust. If employees, they may feel a bit vulnerable in having this conversation, particularly if that's a new experience for them. Maybe they've never had a manager have a quality coaching conversation with them before. And that quality coaching requires mutual trust. You need to listen with empathy. I saw listening skills in the chat. I'm right there with you. That's so important. So that's about listening from the other person's perspective, putting yourself in their shoes to the best that you can. Withhold judgment. If the person that you're talking with can see that on your face, you're deciding yes or no to each thing that they say, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, they're probably going to start shutting down. So they need that environment where they can really think. And sometimes people will say something, and as soon as they say it, they think, oh, actually I can think of something that's even more effective. And they just need that time to be able to go through the thoughts. So yes, it takes patience. Coaching can require more time on the front end, but on the back end, it should, in the long run, it should save time for a manager, particularly if those employees are developing, they're becoming more independent, they're creating more innovative ideas. Coaching requires humility and confidence. If you find that giving some control over to your employees is threatening, it will limit your ability to coach them successfully. All right, we are going to take some more time for application. And so first, I'd like for you just to take a few notes for yourself. I want you to have that quiet time to think. And then Megan is going to split into groups again so that we can all discuss. So take a couple of minutes to think about how you want to put into action what you've learned today. So jot down your ideas. Writing your ideas down can increase your commitment to applying them. So how will you practice this skill? It's okay to pull out your calendar or pull up your calendar if you have an online calendar and think about what's coming up in the next few days that would enable you to practice what you've learned. So it might be with a peer. Maybe you've got a great conversation, a great relationship with your manager, and you think that asking your manager a few thought-provoking questions would be helpful. Maybe it's someone outside of work. So who's the individual? What's coming up? Think about how you might check for an opening. And then what are some thought-provoking questions you might ask? What might you say? And keep in mind, I've simplified this quite a bit. Normally those coaching conversations, there's multiple questions, and great managers have those coaching conversations over time. So definitely not a one and done kind of event, but for our practice, we can just think of a specific instance. All right. Okay, so Megan, do you think we've allowed enough time for people to break out into the practice groups?
Yes, I will open the rooms right now. feel free to join. And again, if you're not able to right now, just hang out with us.
Yeah, that's fine. Again, we've done really well on time. And so I'm thinking that once they come back from the breakout groups, we could give people an opportunity if they wanted to share their insights with the larger group. Okay. How much time are you giving them?
I can bring them back whenever you would like. I can.
We're coming back. Are they all back, Megan? You're on mute, Megan.
Everybody's here.
Okay, excellent. Wonderful. I hope you guys had a great conversation. So other people on the call today may find it very encouraging to hear some insights that you've had. Could I get a couple of people to come off of mute and share some insights that they had through the application conversation that y'all just had? Anyone feeling brave?
I had just remarked that thinking about some of these approaches that I could apply these to coworkers and basically try to be a leader in my position, even when people don't necessarily formally report to me.
I think that's great. I agree. People can use your help. Sometimes people just need that safe place and someone they trust that they can think through ideas with. Would someone else like to share an insight?
I think the thing I learned was I often have that picture in my head of the answer I want before going into the conversation. And that's really not fair to an employee if you're truly trying to coach, right? So if it's an emergency or something that just needs to get done, that's one thing, but don't try and coach in that situation. You know, reserve the true coaching moments for the appropriate time was a big aha moment for me. So thanks for sharing that, Heather.
Absolutely. I'm glad you got that out of this. And I would say when I was first learning to coach, that was probably one of the biggest challenges for me, because I would have an idea that I thought was great. And I kept trying to push someone toward that. And that's really not what coaching is. Sometimes when you're coaching someone, they do need a few clues, and you can throw them a life preserver. If you have a couple ideas, you can throw them a couple of ideas. What's nice about tossing someone more than one idea is that then they have options to choose from, and it doesn't feel so much like direction. But with direct reports, sometimes they're going to do whatever the manager says. They're going to not see those ideas as options. They're going to see them as direction. So really giving the individual as much time as possible to come up with their own ideas and then standing behind them in those ideas may be the most valuable thing for their development and actually their performance. Is there anyone else who has an idea, an insight they want to share? Come off of mute and share.
Well, and I think too, we had discussed in our breakout room that allowing our employees to be part of the solution. So if, there is a policy in place that is just, there are some policies that you just can't veer away from, that is just how it's going to be. But some policies you may be able to revisit, and, they can help brainstorm a solution that may work better for everybody involved and not just, what's going on. So giving them that power to be part of the solution.
I agree with that. Giving employees a voice can be very motivating. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Well, let's see if I can get that to advance. There we go. So we're nearing the end of our time. Feels like it's gone very quickly. So I provided some foundational information that you can use to develop the skill of coaching employees. We reviewed examples of questions you can ask to get employees thinking to resolve issues. And it also provided suggestions on when and where to coach. So it definitely takes time and effort to build this skill. If you've been using another approach with peers or colleagues, with your employees, let them know in advance that you are building a new habit. If your behavior suddenly changes, they may not initially respond in the way that you'd hoped. So it's fair to tell them, I'm working on a new skill and I'd like to ask you some coaching questions if that's really different from what you've done in the past. All right, we have plenty of time for questions. So if you would like to put them in the chat, you're welcome to. If you want to come off mute and ask your questions, or if there was an insight you wanted to share and haven't had a chance yet, we can keep the participation going.
Heather, if you kind of touch on this, if you would like to practice these skills, but maybe you don't have a formal direct report or something like that, do you have any advice on where to start? Do you pick a friend? What do you do?
That's a great question. And maybe it's just starting with noticing what's going on around you. So for example, you might have a colleague that you already have a trusting relationship with, and you can tell that that individual is in a bit of distress. Maybe they're up against a tight timeline and they seem overwhelmed, or they seem to be wrestling with a lot of different options. That might be a great opportunity to check for an opening. I know there are some other great coaches on this conversation. And so if somebody else has a great answer to Megan's question about how do you practice if you don't have direct reports, feel free to jump up and offer your thoughts.
Hey, Heather, this is Rena.
Hi, Rena.
Hi. I think a great way to practice is to look at a situation where the stakes aren't very high and that you're practicing with people that you know are on your side. So when I first became a coach, I really started looking at and asking people, hey, I'm kind of practicing this new way of being and listening. So would you play along with me? But it's if you choose places that are safe, i.e. children, home, family, etc., and start in areas that don't have as high of a stake involved in case you're building these skills, sometimes that can be helpful.
I love it.
Thank you. And there's a question in the chat as well. What tips do you have for a situation where the coach is the person being defensive? So maybe a little bit of managing up type of thing.
Let me think about this for a second. Yeah. You know, one of the things that I think is most difficult about being a coach and coaching is that those words get applied in a lot of situations. And so I think we need to narrow it down. Are we really looking at a coaching context if someone is being defensive? So it might be that the individual intends to coach, but they are either being directive or they're under some kind of other pressure. I'm just thinking that they're probably in your situation, there's a lot more going on. And in general, it'd be great just to listen, just to try to understand where that individual is. Maybe there's something more going on for them. So applying some empathy. They may not feel like there's mutual trust. Maybe there's some things that can be done to build trust. Those are my initial thoughts. It's a good question. Yeah, I remember I had a manager, he wanted to give me feedback. He'd say, let me give you some coaching. And, he wasn't giving me coaching. It was a euphemism for the feedback and the correction that he was trying to give me. And that had value. I needed to hear his feedback. It just wasn't coaching. So there are times when we need to stop and make sure, are we really having a coaching conversation here? Because if we're doing something else, then there might be another approach that's best. And my comments today are really assuming that there is the trust, that you have that peaceful environment that enables a great conversation, and that each person is on each other's side, and that powerful coaching conversation where thoughts can be put out there and developed or discarded as needed really exists. And you don't always have that situation, but I think with some consciousness, you can do more to create those situations. we have any new questions coming in?
I'm not seeing any. Oh, here we go. When is the best time to start a conversation? How soon is too soon? And how do you prevent being too late?
That is a good question. So I think for the person who intends to coach, you need some time to assess the situation. You can't really manufacture it too much. You know, if you want to have a coaching conversation, but someone doesn't need it, that's probably not the best time. So if something took place, maybe someone, let's say they missed a deadline, you're going to want to have a conversation with them fairly promptly, but I would wait until you're calm. If you're upset, that's not a good time to have the conversation. Wait until you really assess the situation. If it's one of those things where there may be multiple sides going on, perhaps you start with really understanding the different stakeholder perspectives. But I do think, yeah, you can try to give someone coaching way too late and it may not be helpful. And that may be part of checking for the opening, is let the individual know, here's what I think I may be able to help you with. And if someone tells you, well, I've already resolved that, then clearly, the opportunity passed and you're looking for the next opportunity to coach them. I hope that helped. I see a question from Rena. Can you ask what you need in the conversation? Yeah, I think that's a great idea, particularly when you have that trusting relationship. You may need to let someone know what I need right now is I just need you to listen, or I need us to build more trust, or I need you to help me move forward with ideas. If the person you're attempting to coach has never experienced this before, it may be difficult for them to articulate what they need, but particularly if they've had these kinds of conversations in the past, giving them the freedom to say, how you can help them most may be the most powerful thing for them. And sometimes people just need some quiet time to think through it on their own for a while, and then maybe come back to you when they're down to a couple of final ideas that they perhaps want to decide between. What can you do in the conversation to stay on topic or avoid? Ooh, that's a good one. What can you do in the conversation to stay on topic or avoid personal agendas? Yeah, I think if you're the person who's doing the coaching or intends to do the coaching and you've got a personal agenda, I'm going to question whether this is really a coaching conversation. It might be something else. If your intent is to be directive, if you already have an idea in mind, I would encourage you just to go with that and don't pretend this is about something else. I'll share a personal experience. I was working with a manager. We're a small team, and he planned a multiple day strategic planning meeting where all the employees shared their ideas and developed what the goals would be for the department for the next few months. And then near the end, he swung back around and said, actually, I've already determined what we're going to be doing, and basically told us we needed to discard all of those things that we had been working on. And it really created some distrust and some aggravation. You can imagine the frustration. Now, that's not exactly a coaching conversation, but it's a similar approach. His intent was in a group format to get everyone thinking and sharing ideas. So yeah, a lot of frustration can result if someone is actually driving toward a personal agenda. All right, what tips do you have for people with completely different communication styles? For example, if the coach is direct and the recipient is passive, indirect, avoidant. That's a great question. I think when someone tends to be passive, indirect, or avoidant, first of all, does the individual have confidence in that situation? And what can be done to build trust? This may require a series of conversations to get to the point that everybody has confidence and trust, and that vulnerability, that feeling of vulnerability isn't driving the show. Because if someone's feeling very, very vulnerable, they may not feel comfortable at all sharing their ideas, especially when they're not even sure yet. They're not even convinced yet if their own ideas are right. They're still playing with ideas. Gosh, I would hope if the person coaching that they would have a sense of the other individual and may be able to adjust their style. If someone's being very directive, it may not exactly be a coaching conversation. That's a good question. Those are my initial thoughts. And if someone else in our conversation today has a perspective on that, you are welcome to come off mute and join. I realize these these situations can be more complex than they appear on the surface. I like these questions, though. Very helpful to bring up the ideas and make this seem realistic. Think about how we'd really apply these skills. Yeah, I keep thinking about that question. If I am having an initial coaching conversation with someone, I've never talked with them in this manner before, to stop and think about their styles and their personality and how they work best could really help the conversation to be more effective.
Feel like I have to say, you know, a lot of our leadership programs really are based in these sort of interpersonal communication skills and, you know, active listening and understanding where others are coming from and things like that. So, so yeah, it's hard to fit it all into one hour lunch and learn. But I'd encourage you to explore some of these topics in more detail, possibly through our leadership development programs, but you know, at least through other lunch and learns and things like that, because there are a lot of layers.
Absolutely. Your employees need to believe that you are for them. That really helps. Yeah, I like that. Rena's next point, having an agreement for how you can best work together can really help. I really appreciate the participation, a lot of good questions. Megan, we have a little bit of extra time. How do you want to take it from here?
I see one more question on the other end of the spectrum. How do you address a supervisor that is very micromanaging and you would prefer to be coached more than managed? How do you present that to them without causing animosity? So again, some of those difficult conversation skills. I'll even put out the pitch to Michelle Lubke, who was actually our speaker in January on having difficult conversations. And I feel like these two hand in hand. But yeah, Heather, if you want to take that first, and just know that resource is also available if you want to go back and watch that presentation as well.
Absolutely. That's really about the relationship. It's about mutual respect. And I agree, it may be a difficult conversation. Let me read again and really think about how I want to answer this. I think, gosh, there's so many different things, so many different variables that could be going on there. So it's hard to give one absolute answer, but I think it may be having in mind the conversation that you want to have and looking for that opening. Certainly if that individual is having a day where he or she is very agitated, or maybe you can tell stressed out, maybe a lot of pressure from above, that may not be the right day. But there may be an opportunity if the individual expresses that they are taking some new classes or trying some new things, or they ask, hey, what can I do to better be a better manager for you? And then letting them know you'd love for them to ask you more questions and get you thinking more, and to hold back a bit on giving as much direction. Yeah, I think it's a really simple conversation with a simple request, and probably the challenge is finding the opening.
And just one other comment, I would think that these are types of things that need to happen during the interview process or immediately after being hired. Ask your manager, how can I help or support you? It might unearth some hidden stress.
Yeah, I like that. Rena. You may be able to offer something, particularly if you've got a bit of trust there. That may be a great way to get it started. Let's go back to the previous.
Well, thank you all so much. If there are no other immediate questions, I think there are, again, so many different avenues to explore these topics and things like that. But feel free to reach out to me or Heather, directly. If you have follow-up questions, we'd love to have an additional conversation with you and get you the resources that you need. But again, just thanks for participating today. We hope you enjoyed the content. We hope you enjoy the gift card coming your way in your email inbox later today. And we'd love for you to just spend a minute or two filling out our eval as well. It really helps us to make sure we're tailoring these sessions to exactly what you need. So thanks for being here. Thanks for participating, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.